Well, hello, I'm Doug Apple, back with another special interview for you today. And what do you think of the topic of marijuana? Well, that's on the minds of a lot of people. There's some new information has come out about the health factors connected to marijuana use. And, here in Florida, we did not put that recreational marijuana amendment into the Constitution. It did not pass in the last election cycle, but as many of you probably know, like I do, where they're already getting signatures rounded up to do it again to try to get an amendment to the Florida Constitution legalizing the recreational use of marijuana. Well, why would I be against that, for example? I mean, I'm against the legalized recreational use of marijuana because I don't want all our people to be doped up. We need the whiz kids to be on the ball. We need smart people operating things, and we need young people growing up without their brains being hindered by marijuana. But what's the problem, Doug, with marijuana? All right, well, here's one thing, and we're going to talk with Mike Sharman of Share Healthcare about that here. But in a journal called Heart, they reported this new study under this headline: marijuana use doubles the risk of heart disease. And this new study has found alarming risks associated with marijuana use, including more than doubling the rate of heart disease, in addition to raising the risk of strokes, lung cancer, and heart attacks. And in one article I read, it had this report from the Carnegie Mellon University from last year saying for the first time ever, daily marijuana users outnumber daily alcohol drinkers. And I think one of the reasons is because there's this branding that marijuana is safe and natural. Well, how safe is it? We're going to dive into this subject right now with Mike Sharman of Share Healthcare. Mike, go ahead and take it away.
Well, I think deadly nightshade is also natural. That doesn't mean it's safe. Almost all the compounds that you would have as poisons are natural. What we want to be recognizing is this is an unnatural way to receive this product. Either if you smoke it or if you grind it up and you're making the gummy bears out of them, it's not what God intended. If we look at Galatians 5:20, where it's talking about all the things we're not supposed to be doing, and witchcraft is one of them, that one word for witchcraft is pharmakia, which is where we get our word pharmacology from, pharmakia. So why was that the word that was used for witchcraft? Because that's what the practitioners of the occult did so that we couldn't have a sound mind. And that's what God has asked us to have, is a sound mind. Well, this article in Heart is talking about how, they aren't focused on the mind aspect of it. We could have a series of shows on the problem that marijuana and THC have on our minds. It's focused on our bodies. And it's a serious issue, not just with young, not just with liberals, but as we can see, Texas had a huge push to completely outlaw any THC product. Marijuana, gummy bears, consumable hemp products, etc.
Let me ask you something real quick. Are there, for medicinal purposes, healthy versions of marijuana, but it doesn't include the THC?
Yeah, and there have been for quite a while.
Okay.
So whenever you hear about people saying, well, I want medical marijuana, no, that there isn't a medical marijuana. And there's a non-hallucinogenic, non-mind-altering versions of THC that you could take in pill form other ways. And that's been around for a long time. So it's why you'll see billboards saying medical marijuana dispensary here. Mm-hmm. Well, you don't need that if it's just for that very small finite group of people who may have epilepsy or a cancer issue. You don't need that. What those billboards are doing is trying to be able to sell you commercially produced marijuana that you use to go get high on. That's rampant throughout the nation, really. Mm-hmm. I think there's 20 6 states. There's over 20 states in which recreational marijuana is now legal. Medical marijuana is legal in more. And the interesting thing is the marijuana doesn't distinguish in your body between whether you got a prescription for it or you bought it from some guy on the street corner. It's unhealthy for you. And the reason I brought out the Texas issue is because, Texas is a 100% Republican-controlled government. The House, the Senate, the agencies, and the governor. So their legislature had passed this bill that the governor had been silent on during the legislative issue, outlawing any consumable hemp, any consumable marijuana THC. And he vetoed it, and which totally floored the conservative groups that had pushed it. But when you read the articles about it, it mentions conservatives are split on this issue. So, and what his proposal, it wasn't a Vermont-style, we want marijuana everywhere. His proposal is, well, we need to heavily regulate it as alcohol is. And so I'm calling a special session, he said, in July 21st. All right. So he wants to regulate it as opposed to outlaw it. Okay. But that lets you see the division that's there and the lack of education. So that's why it was helpful to have the studies that were recently done. The American College of Cardiology had first put out their notice about this back in March, and talking about 2 different studies, which the journal article on Heart that was just recently published talked about the same thing. And one was a retrospective study, meaning looking back at people in this one particular study, back over time. And then the other is a meta-analysis, and a meta-analysis looks at many other studies which were done on the same topic. So in the retrospective study, the researchers found that cannabis users younger than age 50 were over 6 times as likely to suffer a heart attack compared to non-users. 600% more likely. Now, the meta-analysis, just looking at other studies that have been done and averaging it, found it just to be, 50% more. So what was the difference? So the retrospective study took out anybody who had, it was only those under age 50, only those who had no other cardiovascular problems, only those with no blood pressure problems, only those with no cholesterol problems, only those with no diabetes, no tobacco use or prior coronary disease. In other words, the retrospective study only looked at healthy people under 50 and found they had a 600% more likely risk of heart attack, fourfold, that is 400% more risk of stroke, 2 times more at risk of heart failure, which is different than a heart attack, and then 3-fold increase of death. That's huge. You take healthy people, you have them become marijuana users, and their risk of these serious medical problems vastly increase. You don't take dead leaves, burn them, put them in your body, and bad things not happen. You don't take a drug, which is what this is, and use it in a way that God would not approve of, and it winds up being bad for you. I mean, there's no surprise there at all.
So diving into that little biblical angle is, why would you say God would not approve?
Well, because that when they were talking about witchcraft, remember, we want a good hermeneutics, good Bible study. You want to look at context. And so the context for that Galatians 5:20, they were talking about what did the witch doctors, what did the occult practitioners at that time, what did the people who they called witches, what did they use to have people enter the dark world? What did they use to have people enter the occult? They used mind-altering drugs. So we know very clearly. And then we also know when God tells us he wants us to have a sound mind, that means he doesn't, they call it dope for a reason. I know that was an old 70s, 60s, and 70s phrase, but they do call it dope for a reason. When I'm a lawyer, and May 1st is Law Day, And in most areas in the United States, that's the time that lawyers go into high schools and speak to high schools about law. And, what it means when they become 18, what's going to be the impact on them, that type of thing. So when I've done that, pretty much every time you get a question from some of the kids or, somebody will ask it, is, well, what about legal marijuana? And so I just bounce right past the legality or illegality. I say, okay, how many of y'all know somebody 45, 50 years old who's been smoking marijuana since they were your age? And basically every hand gets raised. Somebody knows somebody. So, okay, do you want to have that life when you're 45 and 50? No. Nobody raised their hand. I said, and why is that? Because they have no ambition. They aren't getting along anywhere. They're driving a car with 3 different colors of primer on it. It's called dope for a reason.
Yeah.
You can think of another metaphor for it. A nickname is weed. Well, what does weed do in your garden? It chokes out the good fruit. It's going to choke out the good fruit in your life. And again, good hermeneutics is we want to have the whole Bible interpret itself. And God throughout is wanting us to be clear-minded. God throughout is wanting us to be sober. God throughout is wanting us to hold fast, stand fast. God throughout is wanting us to be ambitious in the sense of being the fullest, most complete person that we can. He wants us to love Him with our whole mind, whole body, whole heart. You can't do that if you're all drugged up. In that article that you had mentioned, I think it was Washington Examiner had one of the main articles on it of the Heart Journal article. And it mentioned that point that you had said about the Carnegie Mellon University, daily marijuana users outnumber daily drinkers. But then it also mentioned a 2022 survey that 69% of people aged 18 to 24 indicated they preferred marijuana to alcohol. So you have daily marijuana users versus daily alcohol users. And that is it's easier, I think, to be a daily marijuana user than a daily drinker because you don't have a daily morning hangover. The damage is much more subtle. But I think we want to recognize the damage is hugely there. 6-fold increase of heart attack, 4-fold increase of stroke, 2-fold increase of heart failure, 3-fold increase of death. That's for people who are healthy and under 50. No prior medical danger. So as a public policy issue, we want to avoid accommodating, enabling marijuana use. We want to flee from it, run from it. We don't want to, you regulate things that have some societal benefit. You outlaw those things that are inherently harmful. And this is. And it's quite different from alcohol. One, because as I just mentioned, alcohol has that almost immediate warning to it that if you overindulge one evening, you're going to have a hangover the next. If you overindulge every single evening, you're going to have a hangover every single day. And that itself is a warning over and over and over. Doug, you had mentioned that I'm the general counsel for Share Healthcare, and this might be a good time to explain to people how come Share Healthcare exists and why it's so much more affordable than other ways that people choose to take care of their medical expenses. We're a 501c3. Share Healthcare is a 501c3 ministry. So it's a Christian ministry, a Christian nonprofit. And its purpose is to help Christians share one another's medically necessary, key phrase there, medically necessary medical expense. We're $149 for a single per month, $249 for a couple, and $349 for a family of 4, and then $50 for each child after that. So anybody hearing that knows whoa, that's way less than anything else I could do, whether a health plan, health insurance, co-op, whatever else you could do to take care of your medical expenses. How come it's so much more affordable? Well, one, we don't share in the results, the problems of marijuana use, whether it was medically prescribed, whether it's in a state where it's legal, or whether you're using it illegally in an illegal state. Marijuana is marijuana regardless of what geographic boundary you're in. And it hurts people. It doubles your chance of death. It triples your chance. No, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. Look at my stats again here. It triples your risk of cardiovascular death, doubles your risk of just heart failure, quadruples your risk of stroke, and what is that, sextuplet, sixfold, your risk of heart attack. All those things are medical expenses, but they weren't medically necessary. They were self-induced. Mm-hmm. And so as a Christian ministry wanting to help people share their medically necessary medical expenses, we set down certain bright lines. We don't accept people who are using tobacco. We don't accept people who are using marijuana. And if they had lied on their application and then they're submitting a medical expense for it, we do see their medical records and we'll see the usage. And if they lied to us, that doesn't get shared. And so just by the application, that excludes the people who are using it and are honest. Our review of the medical records exclude those expenses for people who were not honest. As to alcohol, well, I'm a teetotaler, but apparently Jesus wasn't, or at least he did not mandate that. How do we know that? His first miracle was turning water into wine. But consistently, again, using good hermeneutics, good Bible study technique, you interpret the whole Bible by the whole Bible. And all through the Bible, it tells us, yes, you might want to have a glass of wine now and then, but you don't want to use it to excess. I mean, that's all through Scripture. So we have the restriction with Share Healthcare that, yes, you can use alcohol, but only in moderation, and we define that as being 1 to 3 drinks per week. You know, if you go out on an anniversary and you have a glass of wine with your steak dinner, okay. You toast somebody with champagne at a wedding or New Year's, okay. But being a constant user, not okay. Again, why do we do that? One is just common sense, but primarily, I should make that number 2. Number 1 is because God's Word tells us to avoid those type of things, and also to avoid the things that would be a door to temptation opening up to us. Mm-hmm. And those lessened inhibitions definitely are that.
Yeah. One thing I want to point out that I read in some of this material for these studies on the health risks of marijuana, and it said that the study used medical data from around, this is what I read, see if this confirms, you can confirm this, 200 million people.
Yes.
That's not a small study.
No, it's not. And that's the value of a meta-analysis. It's hard for any single study to review that many records. But when you're looking at all the studies or a large group of the studies on the same topic, then somebody else could have done a study of 2 million. Somebody else could have done a study on 10 million. And so collectively, that meta-study did get a total of 200 million people. Which
is huge. And
yes.
When these people stop me in the parking lot to try to get me to sign the signature for legalizing recreational marijuana, then I tell them all the same thing. I don't know what the law should be in a free, secular society, basically. But I do know this. We can't have all the whiz kids getting high, because at some point our nation will fall to the hackers. And then one of the funny things is then I'll bring up Iran. I'll say, Iran would love to destroy America. And if they could do it by hacking into the economic system, the electric infrastructure, hack into the Pentagon, anywhere, everywhere, to bring it down, they would love to do it. And the only reason they aren't doing it is because we currently have some people smart enough and working hard enough to prevent them. But if our society, if American citizens ever get to the point where we don't have enough of the smart kids working hard enough to keep out the hackers, we're going down.
Oh, absolutely. And just focus. We need to be able to have everybody from the wrench turner up to the engineer, to the manager of the engineer, to the chief executives. We need to have everybody be able to be completely focused. And that's what God wants us to do. And again, getting back to that basic biblical desire, that desire of God that we can see in the Bible, He wants us to love Him with our whole mind, our whole heart, our whole self, our whole body. We can't do that when we're under a cloud of marijuana or under the flood of alcohol. You can't do it.
Well, back to Share Healthcare. If people would like to find out more about this Christian nonprofit healthcare sharing ministry, what should they do?
Well, they can look us up on the web. So it's sharehealthcare.com. Pretty simple, sharehealthcare.com. And then they can call after they've looked over the web, written down their questions. They can call 1-844-SHARE-HC. 1-844-SHARE-HC.
All right. And we've been talking with Mike Sharman of Share Healthcare. And for Wave 94, I'm Doug Apple.